It's a pleasure to have you here with us. You are a wonderful keynote speaker. You are not from Brazil, you're miles away from Brazil. However, with technology, the world has become smaller. So, your testimonial is very important for our forum and your experience. Thank you for sharing your experience with us. You're the first keynote speaker to talk to us here today, international one in this panel. So we will be having 25 minutes. I am the moderator. I am a producer. I grow corn, soybeans, and I'm also a cattle rancher. So I will hand it over to you now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Good evening, everyone. I am honored to be here to add to the discussion on looking ahead, nutrition and food safety. My name is Angela Perihansen-Knedu, and I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Ghana, Department of Nutrition and Food Sciences. To start off, we know that the United Nations suggests that the world's population would reach about 9.7 billion by 2050, putting pressure on the food system to supply efficient, wholesome food to feed the world's population. The agri-food system as it stands now has many interlinked challenges ranging from climate change to its effects, land use, sustainable food production, pest control issues, emerging diseases, evolving consumer needs, advanced technologies applied along the food continuum, distribution challenges, food prices, etc., with underlying nutrition and food safety issues. We also know that the COVID-19 pandemic revealed the limitations of our food supply around the globe. And although there has been progress in closing some of the gaps, the current instability in Ukraine has further worsened challenges facing food systems in many countries, especially developing countries. There has been technological strides, though, in introducing novel foods, nutritious foods produced sustainably, such as insects for food, cultured meats, and plant-based meat. But do these present any new food safety and nutrition challenges, or even ethical challenges? We have approximately 8 years to achieve the UN 2030 agenda, so we need game-changing solutions. To achieve safe and nutritious foods for all, food system transformations are critical to proactively respond to emerging challenges facing the agri-food sector. And these transformations need to address the following: consumer needs as they evolve, malnutrition issues, could be overnutrition, obesity issues, hidden hunger, availability, access, utilization of food, and stability of these, which are the pillars for food security, food safety issues, equity and technological advances applied to the food value chain today, ethical issues, as well as planetary health. I'd like to make reference to the FAO's Foresight report that was published this year on future of food safety as we look ahead. This report predicts food safety challenges based on current and emerging trends and provides recommendations to guide decision-making. I'll highlight only two of the topical issues discussed in the report. First of all, increase in global temperatures linked to climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, are contributing to extreme climatic events that has impacted on ecosystems, economies, and human, plant, and animal lives. Current temperatures are about 1.2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial times, and global warming is expected to exceed 2.7 degrees Celsius within a century, with exacerbating effects on our planet, including heat waves, floods, droughts, wildfires, some of which we're experiencing today. And all of these can lead to adverse effects on our ecosystem, with significant economic losses due to failed food production seasons and ripple effects on livelihoods. There's also an increase in geographic prevalence and distribution of foodborne pathogens like Campylobacter and Salmonella. There's also a report on potential association of increased temperatures on increased rate of antimicrobial resistance of dangerous bacterial pathogens. Some notable ones are Staph aureus, Klebsiella, Salmonella, Listeria monocytogenes, and Campylobacter. We also know that climate change has effects on algal blooms with consequential harmful effects on aquatic life. Mycotoxins, especially aflatoxins, which are commonly associated with grains in tropical Africa, are now spreading to other geographical areas such as the Mediterranean regions, and they are establishing there. Lastly, we know that climate change also has impact on water scarcity. Water scarcity has direct implications on food production, food availability and access, but most importantly, hygiene and sanitation problems, which have direct impact on food safety. The interventions recommended include early warning systems, monitoring and surveillance data, and also more research to inform decision-making, which also requires funding. The second point I'd like to highlight is consumer behavior and food safety. Current trends in consumer drivers include healthier food options, sustainable production of food and sourcing of raw materials, food safety issues, animal welfare issues, ethical issues, urbanization, increased income, food waste issues, planetary health, among others. All of these have positive and negative implications on nutrition and food safety. I have listed here some 2022 trends on the food sector, which are driven by consumer behavior. First, we have personalized nutrition, such as nutrigenomics, which makes use of individuals' genomic information to develop bespoke diet plans for consumers. There's also increased use of robotics in food production and food service, which is enhancing quality and safety at the detriment of livelihoods for employees. The COVID-19 pandemic boosted the nutraceutical industry as many consumers are interested in immune boosters. In Ghana and in many countries around the world, there's a spike in herbal tea consumption, healthy beverages, and other food products containing immune boosters. E-commerce is transforming the food industry, especially in developing countries and informal settings, as there's less handling of cash by food handlers, reducing rate of contamination. 3D printing is a game changer in using alternative ingredients in healthy, sustainable food manufacturing and customized foods. Consumers are also calling for environmentally friendly and interactive food packaging innovations. There's a general trend towards increased demand for biodegradable food packaging materials, intelligent and active packaging that can inform consumers on the quality and safety of high-risk foods. There's increased interest in plant-based meat alternatives and cultured meats, insect for food, and seaweed as alternative food sources. They may present unorthodox risks that may evade regulatory agencies and thus require particular attention in their risk assessment processes. And of course, these require further research. The recommendation is to provide adequate, credible food safety and nutrition information through labeling instructions, popular media, online sources, etc., to inform consumers and dilute inaccurate information that can confirm consumer biases, misinform consumers, and cause unnecessary panic and food waste. I'd like to comment on the case of Ghana, where I am currently, with regards to food safety and nutrition. and what the future looks like for us. Ghana is a lower middle income country in West Africa. Ghana has high economic growth and transformation. Ghana has also achieved substantial improvements in food security, especially reduced poverty and chronic and acute child undernutrition. But we still have substantial limitations in reducing malnutrition and foodborne diseases. Based on our multiple indicator cluster survey, we still have a high prevalence of diarrhea, around 33%. 30% of children are underweight, 45% stunted, and 16% wasted. Over the last couple of years, there's been a spike in cost of fruits and vegetables, which are nutritious foods, and these are eroding nutritional gains made. Most Ghanaians obtain their foods from the informal sector, which has poor regulatory oversight. Fortunately for us, very recently, just last month, as part of our World Food Safety Day celebrations, the government of Ghana, through the Ministry of Health and the Ghana Food and Drugs Authority, launched the food safety policy. And our food safety policy has three main goals. One, to strengthen food safety governance through food safety management, surveillance systems and programs, social behavior change, and communication strategy. Secondly, to strengthen institutional coordination and collaboration among agencies responsible for food safety and nutrition. These include food safety coordinating committees, establishing such a committee to oversee risk assessments, provide guidance documents, etc., on current and emerging food safety and nutrition issues, capacity building, and early warning systems. The last is to ensure harmonization, synergy, and enforcement of food laws and regulations. And this includes both the formal and informal sector. We also launched the National Food Safety Emergency Response Plan as part of the World Food Safety Day celebrations. And lastly, the Ghana Food and Drugs Authority has recently established a new department to develop guidelines for regulating novel foods. So as we think about the future and the food system transformations going on, we are gradually adapting our regulatory framework to adjust to the current trends. I'll end on this note. The food sector is evolving rapidly, causing several transformations in the food system, and the existing food control systems need to evolve in response to such transformations in order to deliver safe food for all. This requires a multi-sectoral effort. Governments have a role to play, industry has a role to play, the private sector, NGOs, academia and research institutions, funding agencies, consumers, economists, etc. We all need to work together to find lasting solutions to our challenging nutritional and food safety problems. After all, food safety is everyone's business. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Angela Perry, professor of the University of Ghana. I see in your speech that we have a lot of barriers, a lot of difficulties to present quality foods and also volume. You talk about this issue of water and climate change. If it is difficult for us now with this war that we are facing, these are things that of course are transitory, but they are not predictable. We did not expect them. We need to have a system, a bigger system. And I like it very much when you say that we have to get together, our peoples and our countries and our governments, they have to think globally. They have to think of food in global terms. We cannot have food scarcity and malnutrition and health difficulties among children, as you just mentioned. We cannot have that. We need to fight for this. There are resources in the world that need to be directed towards this. I thank you very much for what you said. If you would like to come back, we had three lecturers, but you will have only you and Dr. Luis who is here, and then now I will turn the floor over to him, Dr. Luis Inácio. He's the coordinator of nutrients of Para Vida, the Life for Life initiative. He is from Piracicaba. He is a professor of ESALC, the University of Piracicaba, one of the best universities in Brazil, considered one of the major global universities, and he has great experience in this work. Piracicaba, for you who is in Africa, Piracicaba is a city near a big metropolis, the Greater São Paulo, which is where we are. So let's listen to Dr. Luis, and then I will turn the floor back to you if you wish. And now, Dr. Luis, the floor is yours.
Okay, I need my screen, please, with my slides. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be here, to be able to address the audience of the Global Agribusiness Forum 2022, to talk about looking ahead, nutrient and food safety. I have to tell you, first of all, I am going to speak in English because I thought the event is international. So I understood I would have to prepare my slides in English and I would have to speak in English. So although I am a Brazilian, I am going to do that. Second of all, I'm going to concentrate around food security, okay? I will touch on other issues, but my main task is to discuss food security. I also have to say that, and very importantly, that I am here, although many different roles and many different hats that I have used in my life, I am here as the coordinator for the Nutrients for Life Foundation in Brazil. Okay, so let me talk briefly with you about Nutrients for Life. So our mission is of changing the perception of the general public about fertilizers and plant nutrition, from something harmful to something positive and necessary to the human race. And we are based on science, okay? We have a group of scientists that study and devote their time to this mission. And as a scientific organization, we have scientific data that shows, for example, that fertilizer is responsible for about 50% of the food we produce worldwide. And please pay attention to the right of the screen. We have one example, one paper. I'm going to show you several papers that gives exactly the background for this number that I just gave you, that fertilizers is responsible for about 50% of the food we produce. I also want to share with you a statement from Bill Gates that everyone should know, talking about fertilizers. He said, it's a magical innovation that's responsible for saving millions of lives from hunger and lifting millions more out of poverty by boosting agriculture productivity. So anyway, this is our mission. This is what we do. And I hope you can visit our website, which is www.nutrientsforlife.org. Okay, let's talk about food safety, but more specifically about food security Food security, in short, exists when our people, all the time, have physical and economical access to sufficient nutrition food, aiming a healthy life. This is the concept by FAO, okay? So it's good we have this in mind as we talk about food security. Now, the first question that I decided to address with you is food we produce nowadays enough in this planet Earth, in the continents that we have in planet Earth? And the data shows that we produce about 35 more calories than necessary to feed all the people in this planet. Okay, so we are producing right now enough calories. But at the same time, this paper from Bahadur and collaborators, published in 2018, trying to answer the question, does current food production meet global nutritional needs? He showed that the results show that the global agricultural system currently overproduces grains, fats, and sugars, while the production of fruits and vegetables and protein is not sufficient to meet the nutritional needs of the current population. So, in general, calories are enough, but they are unbalanced in terms of what we produce. We are also unbalanced among regions. You can see here a map. I'm going to quote several data from the institution, which is Our World in Data, okay? This is the first one. Here's a map of the world in terms of cereal production in 2018. So the darker the red, more cereal production we have. So you can see the situation is unbalanced, with Africa producing low amounts and also the Southeast Asia. The same thing in terms of soybean, that's not different, it is unbalanced. The same thing in terms of potato, just to quote some examples. Also, we are unbalanced on food diet and kilocalories. As you can see in the map, the darker the red, the more deficit we have in kilocalories for the human population. So again, you can see some regions are okay, some regions we have large deficits in terms of kilocalorie. We are unbalanced on hunger index. And again, you can see some regions of the world have terrible situation, very high hunger index. 33% of sub-Saharan Africa population are hungry, which is very, very scary and is a terrible piece of information. We are unbalanced on zinc deficiency, as you can see in the map. We are unbalanced on vitamin A deficiency in children. And we are unbalanced also among people, my friends, because while in the world we have 12% of world population, they do not have enough calories. At the same time, 12% of the world population has too many calories. So we are unbalanced in so many ways, okay? So we have an impressive challenge. We have the challenge of going at a global scale from unbalanced to a more balanced status in terms of food, calories, and people health. We have an impressive challenge because if everyone in the planet had the same diet as in the developed countries, we would have to use all land, and we would still be 40% short in terms of production. So again, if we would have the same diet as developed countries have, in all the countries, we would be 40% short in terms of production. And this situation with our current population. And we have an impressive challenge because some institutions indicate a lack in the order of 200 trillion calories yearly in just 10 years. So this would be something really, really scary that we need to pay a lot of attention. If this comes true, we'll be in big trouble. And also, we have an impressive challenge when we look at the data that from 2010, about 12 years ago, to 2050, the world will have to produce the same amount of food that was produced in the last 8,000 years. So this poses an amazing challenge for all of us in this planet. And we have to do it, of course, with sustainability, and besides, with misconceptions. And I'm going to talk with you 2 or 3 minutes about misconceptions. The first one is about conventional and organic. Because you see here a tomato, you see an eggplant, and you see lettuce. Now, some people say, instead of just tomato, they say organic tomato. And let me tell you something, all of these are organic, no matter what. We don't have something as inorganic tomato. All the tomatoes are organic. And if you build knowledge on top of a wrong concept, this is problematic. So there is not such a thing as organic tomato. All tomatoes are organic. That's what science says. Now, let me tell you about this. Before agriculture, you had a forest like this, okay? Now, how was the situation of insects, diseases, and weeds in this kind of ecosystem? They were very sad, which I am representing here. Insects were sad, weeds were sad, diseases were sad. Why? Because they had to travel long distances in order to go from one plant to the other. Imagine a disease that would adapt well in corn plants. I mean, it didn't have a very easy life. The same thing in this kind of environment, okay? These insects, these diseases, and these weeds had a pretty tough time. Now, we, as human beings, created something like this. We created agriculture, where you have, for example, a soybean field like this. What happens? I mean, insects are really happy, diseases and weeds, because they find a perfect environment to really reproduce when you have some environment, some ecosystem like this. Now, if you have a situation like this, to all action corresponds to a reaction, so we have to manage it differently. And nowadays, of course, we have to manage it sustainably as best as possible. I have seen before some people quoting the example of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, some time ago, the president, by legislation, decided that they should not use what people call chemicals anymore. And so everything had to be organic. And what happened? You have the news here, you have the source. This organic farming in Sri Lanka was catastrophic. We don't solve things by legislation. We have to have sustainability, and this is so important. And because I am a scientist, I like and I love to quote science and papers. And this is a very important paper published in a very prestigious journal, Field Crops Research, by Dr. Connor. The title is Organic Agriculture Cannot Feed the World. This is not question mark. He's saying that organic agriculture cannot feed the world. I'm not saying I'm against organic. I'm just saying it's part of the solution, but we should not have extremes. So what's really key? It is facing the fact that humans transformed the environment changing ecosystems, and growing incredibly in population, the goal should be to produce as sustainable as possible. That's our mission, okay? The second example of misconception, and this is kind of a little bit futuristic, but I want to pose this issue to you so you think about it, is about entropy. So what's entropy? In simple terms, entropy is the measurement of the amount of energy which is unavailable to perform work. And entropy, according to the law of physics, always increases. So we'll get to a point that we'll not have energy anymore to perform work in this planet. And what this has to do with agriculture? Why is this relevant in the medium to long term? Isn't that amazing that the amount of energy we spend to produce some foods is larger, sometimes much larger, than the amount of energy produced? So we are spending more energy to produce something than the energy that is contained in the product. So I don't understand why people don't talk more about entropy. This is something that we need to discuss. Okay, now let's go to looking ahead, starting in 2022. So what we have to do in order to obtain food security to everyone. I outlined 5 different bullet items. First one is discuss birth control. Second is balance calories distribution. Second is changing diets, decrease food waste, and use compatible technology. So I'm going to discuss one by one very briefly. First of all, discuss birth control. It's very sensitive, right? We have cultural aspects, religious aspects, and it's very unlikely that we are going to come to a conclusion about what to do in terms of birth control. As I said, extremely, extremely sensitive. Now, we have to balance. I showed you that the world is very much unbalanced. So we have to balance food and calories distribution. It's also not so simple. And this, my friends, in my opinion, passes by alleviation of poverty. This is so fundamental for sustainability in so many ways, including food security. Now, let me show you this map of poverty in the world. And you see again that in Africa, most especially in Africa, we have very high indexes of poverty. And you can see very clearly by this slide that there is a very good correlation between poverty to the left and hunger to the right. So to really solve the problem of food security, we have to have people going out of poverty. This is also very difficult because the discussion has to be about social discrimination. And to me, the discussion about poverty, we have to address some fundamental questions. The first question is, what are you willing to give up in favor of others? And what is your country willing to give up in favor of others? So as we think about alleviating poverty, I think we need to think about these questions. The third thing we can do aiming food security is changing diets. What we produce will have to balance according to planetary boundaries. And we are going in the opposite direction of what is necessary. Because in general, many developed countries, they want to go from vegetables to more meat consumption. And I'm not saying we should not eat meat, but I'm just saying that meat production, of course, we cause a little bit more pressure on the environment. And so we need to look and to analyze the issue of changing diets. Also, we need to decrease food waste. It's amazing. Food waste from harvesting to the plate is around 40% of what we produce. From the field to your plate, we as humans, we waste 40% of the food that is produced worldwide. So we need more consciousness, we need more engagement, we need better distribution, and overall we need more education. Okay, and the last bullet point is about compatible ag technologies. So we'll have to use new technologies. We'll have to use better inputs, more efficient, with less pollution, lower risks. We'll have to use precision ag. Robots, drones, sensors will be part every time more of agriculture. We'll have to use for site-specific management, control input application, control harvesting, improve efficiency overall. We'll have to have new varieties, including GMOs. We just heard an excellent presentation in the previous session here in Innovation about biotechnology. And so we need to have good controls to produce, for example, the GMOs, but we are looking for higher yields. We are looking to improve water efficiency. And so we'll need new varieties and new GMOs. We'll need more microbiology. We are having, as we speak, a revolution in terms of microbiology. It's still a lot of things that are nice, some things that are still not proving to be effective, and needs to be carefully studied, needs to be based on science, and we have several applications. We need better machinery for lower soil compaction, more precise, lower losses. We need, and this is so extremely important, region-adapted cropping systems, because we need to go back in a certain way to a more sustainable situation. Like I said, when you have just soybean, when you have just corn, and you grow corn after corn, environmentally, this is not really correct. So we need to abandon continuous single cropping. We need more intense crop rotation. We need to maximize plant diversity. We need a selection of region-specific cropping systems. Also, I'm quoting some examples, and I think this example, of course, does not apply to everyone, but we'll probably need to intensify greenhouse production. For better control, better yields, we have several excellent examples from Netherlands where they produce 20 to 40 times more with 4 times less water. So this is something to keep in our radar screen, exporting this technology to reasons that are favorable. And maybe we have futuristic solutions like laboratory food, like in the example in the photo, this photo from Harvard University. There are several experiments going on. So I'm quoting several possibilities, and there are many other possibilities that will add so we can have food security in the world. Now, to remember, all of these possibilities need an efficient financial system in place. Otherwise, we cannot advance. At the same time, we invest in more technology. We have to think about the low-income farming. The grow-to-eat people. I mean, they are not growing to sell. They are not growing to export. They are growing to eat. We have to respect their background, we have to respect their beliefs, and help as best as possible under their conditions. And I would like to quote an example from Angola, a project that I am part of very proudly, where it's very difficult to import fertilizers. And we are working with the Cabinda phosphate rock for direct application for people of grow to eat and grow to sell, with increases of 50% in yield by using a local input. Okay, so we come to the end of my presentation, Mr. Chairman, with two final thoughts. No, wait a minute. I still need my two final thoughts. Final thought number one, okay, is I am a scientist, so I want to talk about science versus pseudoscience. Because we need science more than ever. So it's important to understand that science is willing to change opinions with new evidence, while pseudoscience is a ballpark measurements and uncertain methods. We also need accurate measurements and recognized methodology. We need information peer-reviewed, and pseudoscience, there is no peer review. We need to consider all information. Pseudoscience selects presentation of favorable information. We scientists, we need to invite criticism. Pseudoscience see criticism as conspiracy. Science sees verifiable results as something extremely positive. Pseudoscience, they have no repeatable results. And science limits claims of usefulness, while pseudoscience claims widespread usefulness. So these are just some examples of the difference between science and pseudoscience. And we need science to really solve our problem. And the second final thought is extracted from my good friend Paul Fixing. I love the sentence which say, it's not about doing things right, but instead it's about doing the right things right. You can pass all your life doing right things, but they were not the things you should be doing because they are not the right things. So, fighting intensively for food safety, food security is a right thing to be done right. With that, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, everyone, for the attention. And we can discuss more later. Thank you.
You delivered a beautiful presentation, bringing your knowledge and your experience and your long academic life and practical life now, combining the two things, and you brought for us something that has been intensively discussed in these first moments of GAV, that we need to have sustainability. We need to work together to improve all these situations of productivity and quality and sustainability and food security, prioritizing food security, and we will reach this by focusing on science. We are near an election, and we need leaders of the sector that are here and that have been here and that are listening to us. They have been discussing science, our Embrapa, and our many other Brazilian universities. They are able to intensify their research so that we can improve. As we've seen in the presentation of Dr. Luis, there are many bottlenecks to be overcome. We have a willingness, I live this, which is the Brazilian farmers' willingness to adapt to the modern things that are coming here. But we need more research time. We need more research. We need to invest in research. We have here a Ministry of Science and Technology, at least in Brazil, is willing. There must be more funds and more interest. We need to foster this more in your school, in Santa Maria and in Rio Grande and Viçosa, and all major Brazilian universities. We have to research. We are in a new moment, a moment of new knowledge, awakening new experiences in the use of land, changing the profile of land, the integration of farming and cattle raising and forestry and many things that have come up, but we need more. We don't have a uniform country. We have a country that varies a lot. The climate and temperature, the temperatures, climate, and etc. We are in a transformation phase. Since we have a little bit of time, I would like to know if Dr. Angela is here, and if Dr. Angela is there, I would ask her a question. Is she online? Can somebody help us with the communication, please? Can somebody help us with a communication so she can come back? In your experience, in your life experience in the university there in Ghana as a professor, I would like to ask you a question. When you said that there needs to be an involvement not only of your government but of many governments, I ask you, what is your experience and your knowledge about the work of FAO? Has FAO been contributing to this issue of hunger in Africa, which unfortunately has been spreading to several parts of the world? I would like to know your opinion and if Africa is modernizing its agriculture. These are my two questions for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those questions. Yes, FAO is very much involved in work in many developing countries, including Ghana. The regional office for Africa is based in Ghana, and we have a local Ghana office, and they work very intensely with government agencies to ensure policies and programming that looks to enhance safety, adapt sustainability, and ensure public protection. So in developing our policies and guidelines, the FAO contributes. For example, with the food safety policy that I talked about, it wasn't so much FAO, but the WHO working closely with the Ministry of Health in Ghana. But FAO is also intensely involved in food safety issues. They work very well with the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, with the Veterinary Services Department. And although we have gaps in terms of technology adoption, basically with regards to availability of resources, the expertise, and how easy it is, the climate to adopt these technologies and the ability to regulate these technologies. We also recognize that the food system is constantly evolving, and the regulatory structures and the policies we have in place are constantly being revised to adapt to these challenges. And Ghana, for one, imports a lot of food from all over the world. So as new foods are produced, as technologies are advanced, we also have to adapt because these foods will end up on our body. So that's a contribution I can make for now. Thank you.
Can I make a comment also? Posso comentar pouquinho? No. Okay, I would like to make a comment about the situation. Okay. In Africa. When we look to the world and we think about regions that really can increase food production, what we have. Of course, I don't have the time to explore all the countries, but let's explore the main countries in the world. Like Canada, for example, and United States. They have good yields. They can increase the yields a little bit, but they don't have a lot of new areas to introduce to agriculture. When you look at China, of course, the situation is worst. They don't have more land. They are producing the land that is available. They can increase yields in the same area, but it's kind of limit. You have Brazil and Argentina and some other countries in South America that have conditions to increase area, especially Brazil, and increase yields. So Brazil is very key for food security in the future. But by fact, the data shows that the two regions that are very, very important and fundamental are Southeast Asia, most especially India and Africa, with Africa being number one. Because Africa, you will have a dramatic increase in the population. Their yields are very low. Brazil can help a lot because we have similar conditions in terms of exporting technology to Africa. So we have to pay, in terms of food security, a lot of attention, especially to India and number one, to Africa. These are the two regions really very key for food security. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Luis Inácio. We have more remarks. I think we are going to start with Dr. Felipe now. He's going to be speaking live. And Dr. Luis Fernando. Oh, Dr. Luis Fernando, my apologies. I introduced the wrong speaker. So my apologies. I thought it was Luis Felipe, but it's Luis Fernando. Are you there, Fernando? Well, initially, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for such an invitation. It's a pleasure to participate in this event. The topics that are discussed, I think they come in handy, by the way, because in the approach we are going to have in regards to food security has to do with a diet that I like to call a plant-based diet. And I'm playing with words here, by the way, is a plant-based versus. So how are these transformations impacting our diet, and how will these transformations impact our diet in the future? So the population is, I know you are discussing food safety and environmental changes, and also there are some indexes in regards to the problems that the world is facing, especially when it has to do with the environment. So I really apologize for speaking so fast. I know that I'm presenting some new data. Maybe this data is new to some of you, but I would like to mention some relevant things that happened and how these transformations have been happening and why they are happening, because the way that we are tackling the soil, the way that we are using the water, and the repercussions of the misuse of the natural resources in the future. So I'd like to start with this classic graphic, which represents the CO2 emissions in the planet. And what we see here in this graphic is that we have increased our CO2 emissions have been increasing in the last 30 years. So this increase has been quite significant, and we must, by no doubt, we must pay attention to the CO2 emissions. So look at what's going to happen. Look at what happened from the 1960s to 2020. It's quite clear that we have a higher concentration of CO2 emissions in our atmosphere. So, and as a consequence, we have had an increase in our average temperatures when compared to last century. When we compare 1950 to 2010, you see there is a significant increase in our temperature, which has been happening quite consistently. And when we cross this information in blue here, it's the greenhouse effect gases, and we cross it with the variation of the average temperature in the planet, and compared to the last century, we see the clear correlation because it's linked to the fact that the temperature is rising due to the CO2 emissions. So basically, what I like to say is that we must tackle this topic among lay people. Why? Because the biggest challenge in humanity is to face climate change, and we need to demystify certain topics, especially this topic. So basically, I'm simplifying, of course, everything, but there are two main factors that contribute to this change. In regards to CO2 emissions and also to climate changes. Of course, energy, but it's not our main goal, and the misuse of soil, of our land. So what has happened in the world as far as the energy that we produce? Look at how serious our energy sufficiency has how serious it has been impacted. So up to the 1900s, we pretty much basically used wood as a source of energy. And after the Industrial Revolution, we started using coal. And most recently, with all the advancements, we started using petrol, natural gas, and so on. And in a very short period of time, by the way. So you can look at from a different prism here, from a different perspective. As of the 1800s, and we do have fossil fuel sources. The fossil fuel sources are responsible for the CO2 emissions. Anyway, so I'm just illustrating here from 1950s to the 2000s. So you have petrol, you have gas, and you have coal. But what is happening as far as CO2 emissions as a whole? Here I illustrate by country. So you have China, India, United States, European Union, and the rest of the world. And you see that China is the top one CO2 country in regards to CO2 emissions. So on the left, we have energy, and I've already explained to you. And now I'd like to illustrate a little bit of how we've been using the soil and how we've been producing the food that we consume. So from a soil perspective and how we use the soil, the land available, we have renewed the CO2 stocks, be it in the fossil fuels or be it in regards to forests. So here we see the world data, as my colleague has already mentioned here. And here we see the planet around 10,000 years ago. This graphic shows, I know there is a lot of information, by the way, but 10,000 years ago, 10 million years ago, we had 57% of forests. And after 5,000 years, it went down to 55. And then in the 1700s, we had 48 per 52%, and then in the 1900s we had 48%. Why? Because we started using the land that we have in the planet more actively and more extensively.
Going from 52 to 48 and reaching 2018 with 38% gaining space of for agricultural land and grassland pastures, and this all contributed to the release of CO2 to the atmosphere and climate change. There is another way to see this. It is a very interesting way that shows what were the forests.
So we have the temperate forests and the other forests. And as you know, we started a systematic process, and the forests started getting smaller and smaller and smaller, represented here in green. And then in the 1800s,
we have an increase in the removal of forests, and now the temperate forests are the ones that are losing more ground. And we reach 1920 when we have an increase and a significant increase in the removal of forests from the country, and removing forests of tropical forests, and this reached until we reached a peak of the removal of tropical forestry around 1980. This was the decade with a greater deforestation of tropical forests. So we see the temperate forests started to recover, while tropical forests are still being significantly removed, but in at a slower rate. And bringing this to our universe, and the most relevant, the data of deforestation in the Amazon from 1995 until now. And here we have a significant contribution. We had a decline between 2004 and 2014, and from 2014 to now, it has increased the removal of tropical forests. So all these events combined make us have, in my point of view, climate change as one of the biggest current challenge facing humanity. And now this going back to the simplification of a complex issue, we have to focus on energy and the use of soil. So let's focus on the use of soil. What is the most common use of soil? Let's make a parenthesis. So when we analyze the use of soil, we see that 77% is used to produce livestock. Not only pasture for animals, but the land that is used to produce animal feed. This is the graph that shows how the earth is used and how soil is used on the planet. 50% of habitable area is used for agriculture and livestock, and 77% is used for production of animal protein as a whole, meat and milk and pork and poultry and etc. If we think a simple thought would be, we would say, we have the opportunity, maybe the biggest opportunity that we have now to reverse this critical situation that was generated in the last 50 years is exactly in the animal protein component, considering the issue that all the predictions point towards that animal protein will not see a decline in consumption, and this is an important point. And I don't want to debate alternative protein, plant-based protein, or laboratory protein. I'm just looking at the data. I'm not defending a type of diet. What I'm saying, what I'm presenting, are data that show that consumption of animal protein will continue growing. Consumption will continue to grow in the coming years. Beef, poultry, or pork or milk. Considering this line of thought and considering that the soil is mostly used for the production of animal protein, I think logically and I say, if we want to prevent climate catastrophe and if we need to change rapidly the form we use the land. So you see, we have a point of energy, fossil fuels, and the use of land. If we can change the form of use of land, if the land is used mostly for livestock, and if livestock products will continue to grow in terms of consumption, it seems that the logical thought leads us to conclude that maybe the best option that we have to avoid climate catastrophes is the redefinition of livestock production systems. So we will produce future animal proteins in a new way if we want to avoid these catastrophes that all the data here seem to point towards, which is a critical issue. So where I bring for you, which somebody starts to think that the diet of the future, more than being a vegan diet or a meat-based diet or whatever it is, it will have to be a diet aligned with the limits of the planet. So that's what we know as planet-based diet. It doesn't matter what you eat, but what you eat has to be produced in a sustainable way. And who is saying this? Institutions, renowned institutions such as the School of Public Health of Harvard University. So I got a quotation from a document of Harvard University that says, different foods can have different impacts on human health. They also have different impacts on the environment. What we need to do is from now on, and the sense of urgency, because all these impacts from the point of view of climate change were generated in a very short period of time. The solution and the space for change will also be very short. And this will have to entail a change in the diet. So we have another organization, WWF, which also mentions a planet-based diet and works on a scientific review of how diet in different countries should change to be in line with planet boundaries. So I have a limit, an example here of something I think is possible. And I think here you have the biggest opportunity. I think we can produce animal protein in a sustainable manner, limiting all the potential effects of impacts on the planet. I'll bring you a very quick example, the no-carbon milk, which is the first carbon-neutral milk of production. We can produce milk with a zero carbon footprint based on a strategy. This is a farm here in São Paulo that produces organic carbon neutral milk with a animal welfare certification. The logic behind this module is that we need to think the system as an eco-agro food system. First, we talked about the food chain and then agro-food chain, because food has to do with agro, and what we are saying now is that we have to put an ecological component in the system. So it's eco-agro food system. So this farm has all its operations with a carbon neutral certification. Here I'm only dealing with one example. It's to bring the ecological system component into the system. Instead of removing the forest, we can plant trees and have intensive high production systems. And we think this is possible. I'm going to show you photos of this picture. This is an aerial view to see how the trees were inserted within this production system. And even that, with all these trees, we inserted, there is a possibility of producing intensively forage, fodder. I'm not saying that the organic system is the solution for all the problems. It is one of the options that we have. So in all the scenarios, we have a tree component, which is has a strong representation in this specific case of this business. And as we master this capacity to produce, of having mastered this production system, we launched a brand of a product that is called No Carbon, to create an awareness, to create a concern on the part of consumers, bringing this issue of a plant-based diet for consumers so that consumers can make their choices based on the ecological footprint of the products, and even then having high quality, high nutritional quality products. This is the biggest challenge. We have a critical problem ahead of us, but I am optimistic. I think we have extraordinary opportunities, especially for Brazil, especially in livestock, making all the innovations so we can have a diet aligned with the ecological limits of the country. Thank you very much. I am available if you have any questions. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was brilliant. I think it is completely aligned with the program and the project of GAF, which simply speaking, which is to do more with less. The pictures of Guaraci, very interesting. What we have is that our time is up. The other panels have already finished, so we have to change. But I'm sure that we had an excellent presentation. Your presentation was excellent, just as Dr. Angelas from Canada and Luis Inácio. I think these presentations will be recorded here, and the GAF, JAF, the Datagro team will think about this, and just as in previous years, we'll prepare a document or something so we can talk more about this and put this in the agenda of governments and etc. The event is being broadcast in some countries, so it's going outside Brazil. Thank you all. I thank all the participants, and I'm very pleased to end this panel. Thank you very much to everyone.